In today's episode of the Spiritual Badass Podcast, I have the beautiful Emily. She's an amazing actual student of mine in the Accelerated Intuitive Program. But today we really discuss about up-leveling your intuitive gifts. We really talk about embracing who you are, really taking, your gifts to the next level. And that includes like healing mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and moving into that whole next level of your gifts. It's a really powerful episode. So I really hope you tune in. Please let us know if you have any questions, and here, let's get started. Okay, so today on the Spiritual Badass Podcast, we have Emily Kammerud. Oh, I did it. And she is a Reiki master teacher, light worker, and an artist. And I want Emily to tell us a little bit, how did you start your spiritual journey? What really kind of was the catalyst for you? And what do you, how are you using your gifts now?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on with you. This is my first podcast and I'm excited. So, yeah, well, I would say like most, my spiritual journey started kind of in a rocky place. I'd say it started in earnest. Like it's probably about 7 years ago, I met somebody that I had actually dreamt about before I had ever met him. And in meeting him, it was just really surprising. It really threw my life for a loop because I had never experienced anything like that. And, sparing the details, it was just something that I suddenly felt the strong calling that I'm like, I need to understand this connection. I need to understand more about myself because the connection was really causing me to have a lot of anxiety and a lot of questioning and an existential crisis came up. And so that kind of brought me to, from there, I actually, I visited a medium, Heather Corbett, and that's how I initially met her. And from there, I started learning tarot and became interested in Reiki. And I'd say probably over the past year or so, becoming a Reiki master and taking more spiritual classes, being a little bit more open-minded, conquering some of these internal issues that I have really, really like I've had a lot of spiritual growth with that. But prior to that, as I'm sure many of us have when we were young, lots of scary dreams, lots of weird voices talking to me, lots of shadow people, scary things. I turned that shit off pretty quick when I figured out how to when I was little. And so it was pretty dormant for a long part of my life up until about 7 years ago. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now with my journey, and I'm currently taking the Accelerated Intuitive class here with Erin, with you, and that's really been, as the title would imply, accelerating my gifts pretty rapidly to the point where I'm like, whoa, like I didn't, so I've been working on this for years, and I can't believe how much progress I've made in such a short period of time. And that's just been great. It's been an amazing deep dive for me to really go into past lives and, look at like issues I didn't even know I had, but they're affecting me and they're affecting me as a healer. And I feel like unlocking these gifts and really facing some of these demons, for lack of a better word, my Reiki gifts are just exploding and my intuitive gifts are just exploding. And so I'm really excited to move on to this next chapter of my life where I can really start helping people now in a more productive way than I probably could before. So, yeah. So that's where I'm at.
I love that. I know it's funny because I knew what was going to happen, because I gave all
Right.
you guys access to a couple DNA activations. I asked Spirit, you're kind of supposed to do it in order, and I did all the fact checking ahead of time, and Spirit's like, it's okay. And then everybody, like within a week and a half, they're like, oh my god, oh my god. I was like, holy fuck, why didn't I combine this before? So you guys were all
Right.
on board, and I think it was maybe Kim who she's like, I how did she say it? She said, I didn't really take you too seriously when you said it's gonna fuck your shit up and it's gonna just explode
Right.
and blow your world up. And she's like, I kind of thought
Yes.
you were a little full of shit. She's like, and I got to take it back because it really, and I'm like, I know it's hard for me to describe how it'll fuck your shit up, but it'll fuck your shit
Mhm.
up, but in such a good way that
Yes.
it's the carrot ahead of the horse. It's like, I know what's gonna happen. I can already see it and I know it and I feel it happening in you guys, but we have to get through the race first, and it's the race part that kind of sucks. But it's also kind of
Yeah.
fun to see. I mean, you've even mentioned how your husband noticed you've just shifted. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like it's
Mhm.
not like it's just you're intuitive. It's kind of this whole mental, physical, emotional shift that people get to experience, you know. So
Yeah.
and it's really hard for me to describe that to people. Like,
Mhm.
you just have these massive transformations, and it's like, well, what the fuck does that mean? It's like, well, everything that you used to know kind of gets turned upside down, and now you get to create a new
Yeah.
everything, you know, and your gifts, as long as you're doing the work, your gifts toe the line, and they're like,
Mhm.
fuck yeah, bring it on. And then it's so how spirit's showing to me right now is one of those old Greek, when they're in the cart horse thing with the little, was it the
Mm.
javelin, not javelin, the, you know, the to the death thing, whatever the,
Jousting?
yeah, kind
Yeah.
of, is it?
With the
With the big
stick?
wooden thing? Yeah. Yeah, is that what
Yeah,
it is?
I think
I
so.
think it is. I
So the
just,
big stick.
yeah, the big stick, you know, and you're like, okay, who's gonna be the winner? Like, who's coming
Yes.
out the winner? You know, is it gonna be, you're gonna do the work and you're gonna be the winner, or are you gonna fall off the horse and kick your own ass? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I love, and it's been really cool to witness your everything shift and the realizations and the empowerment too, because you
Yeah.
start to have this shift of you know, I've been pushing boundaries with humans in spirit. I've been
Mhm.
pushing, you know, we need to get to the roots of what's going on, you know,
Yes.
um and one of the students the other day commented, she's like, thanks for constantly telling me what I need to be doing and letting me have my free will until I was finally ready to do what you tell me to do. I was like,
Yes.
that's what I'm here for. Like, I'm not here to push. I'm just here to
Mhm.
suggest and guide you through, you know. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of, it's cool to, you know, facilitate and witness everybody having those shifts. So so Reiki master, and then so what are you doing now with, have you noticed some shifts in how your sessions are going? Or because I know you mentioned like tarot, your tarot has shifted. It just feels a
Yeah.
little different. So how now do you, when you're working with people, how are you kind of, and there's just a natural progression with our gifts anyways, you know, too. So
Mhm.
how are you kind of serving people? Are you allowing your gifts to, like, expand? That was a hard one for me to not segregate everything I do, and it's taken me quite a few years to, like, obviously combine DNA activations and Akashic Records. I mean, you
Mhm.
know, are you starting to feel like you can combine all of your stuff in a way that, um, you know, will kind of create your own kind of method and way? Is that feeling kind of good for you to, or is it just naturally happening when you're working with people like, "Oh, I feel this," or "I feel that," or how's that part working?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think the first thing that I really started to notice with, something that started with me learning Reiki and then in this class really like hit me hard, but in a very good way, was this like ability to finally surrender. And I know like you talk about mind fuckery and things like that, but I don't know that I really knew what like surrendering was, because to me that sounds a lot like giving up or
Yeah.
just whatever. But no, this was just like a humbling experience of just like trust. And because you, I mean, you go through your spiritual journey and you're like, well, yeah, I have trust, like I trust my intuition. And but the thing is I there was, I'm, and I know a lot of people are, but I'm simultaneously a very emotional, feely person, but I'm also an extremely logical person. I like science. I like, things like that. So, something that I say a lot is like, it's got to make sense to me, and that doesn't mean that there has to be factual proof, but it has to click in my head somehow. And so I think that's where a lot of the struggle was coming in for me for Reiki and tarot, was that I was questioning a lot of stuff where I'm like, I pull up the card and I'm like, okay, so my feeling is this. And I'm like, but, you know, know, sometimes it's this one, and well, or sometimes when I do Reiki, I learned it this way, so that's the way I'm supposed to do it,
Yeah.
instead of being, and now I'm like, no, I know what I'm supposed to do. Like, I don't even need to, like, you've said this before, you can kind of make your own healing thing. Like, I can use my own symbols. And I've since taken this class, I have made my own symbols. I can tap into somebody and just get an idea of, like, um, for example, like, I like to clear people with pendulums, but I found sometimes I clear people by shivering and shuddering. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing that like my whole life when I talk to people when they're upset, and I don't feel scared. I'm just suddenly like, ooh. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, then I'm gonna start doing that. Like, why not? It doesn't have to, Reiki, all of this doesn't have to look a certain way. And so there's just been this natural free flowing of, like, trusting my intuition and things just really falling into place and clicking. So it's just been nice to sit down, do tarot, and just not be like, well, and just being like, yeah, this is what I feel it is, and that's it. And I'm not going to go back to it and question it and whatever. So that's cool. I feel more confident. I feel more empowered. It's great. So yeah.
And it is too, it's almost like you have to give yourself permission. I mean, I've been a Reiki master teacher for 5 years now. And even though I really don't use traditional Reiki, I can teach Asui traditional Reiki and Holy Fire, but I don't really use it. And I was
Mhm.
talking to my friend the other day, another Rachel, another spiritual kind of leader, and she's like, "But
Mhm.
you do Reiki, you just do your own version." I'm like, "Oh," and that makes sense to me because I use more light language and just different, but it's like giving yourself the permission to not
Mhm.
like I struggled. Everything I learned, like the protection methods I learned weren't working. The like nothing was strong enough. And I just felt like, well, when I do Reiki, I'm like in people's blood systems. I'm like in like literally flowing down it. That's not what you learn. So I'm like, oh my God, am I doing it wrong? I don't want to harm the person. So I really had to like learn to lean into myself and be like, it's way more powerful doing it how I feel,
Yes.
how I'm feeling guided to do it, and versus how I learned. So now when I teach it, I teach traditional, but I teach how I do it. You know what I mean? So the intuitive kicker is what I call it. So really leaning on spirit and intuition and zoning in on the part of the body that is maybe causing some problems or whatever it is, but I really don't do traditional Reiki generally. I mean, I'll do some chakra stuff, but I really don't use traditional symbols or anything hardly, um but allowing yourself to expand how you want. Like when I have oracle or tarot cards, I don't even look at the book. And I do not know traditional tarot, not even a tiny bit. But it's that expansion place. Like you get to create what works for you and your gifts, nobody's gifts work the same anyway. So it's just really
Right.
allowing yourself to be open and create methods or allow spirit to help you create methods that work for you and then you implement them with your clients and then you shift them and change them and grow them over time, maybe learn more modalities. And like I know I want to learn like actual breath work this summer because I think
Yeah.
it'll be even more beneficial. I've taken a few classes. A guy comes to town every once in a while and I just really like it. So I always learn stuff for myself first and then integrate it in to my business if it makes sense. So I like that you're surrendering already, like you're kind of allowing how you want and need the information and then how your clients want and need the information. So um I like to think of it as we're just kind of taking all the restrictors off of ourselves. You know what I mean? Like you're taking the horse blinders off and you get to be like more powerful because you're really operating from your power center, and what you have to offer the world. Um,
Mhm.
so how on your how long have you done Reiki? Has it been quite a long time or
No, it's actually been little over a year. So, um, which is, it to me, it was surprising how easily it came to me, and how it was just, of course, again, like I said, there were some aspects of, like, questioning things, or like, am I doing this right? But it's one thing out of all the spiritual stuff that I'm like, get this. Like and that clip before I took the I think it's Reiki Master. I don't remember which one where you learn like the dragon's breath or the breath of
Yeah,
fire where
Reiki
you like.
Master. Yep.
And prior to that, I had been doing that like because I just felt right. Like I was like, blowing on clients and blowing on people. And then when we learned that, I was like, that's kind of interesting. Like I've been doing that and I hope that's okay. But now I know, of course, yeah, I can kind of do whatever I want. And I think what's been most affirming of that is when like we've done the Akashic Records stuff and I've seen myself as a healer from many lifetimes ago. I can guarantee I wasn't doing traditional Reiki.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
because it's
so
not that old, so
yeah,
back
and I'm like,
back
well,
way back. It was our own version of Reiki back then, our own version of
mhm,
energy healing, or whether we created it or we learned it or we taught it, whatever it was, it was our version, so
right.
bringing it forward today is a really cool experience.
Yeah, because it's definitely like now I'm like, I feel like then my Reiki is amplified even more because I've accepted. I'm like, oh, I used to talk to people and clear them. I used to do this. I used to use this symbol. And incorporating that into Reiki now, it's just like it's the feedback that I've gotten from people is like, whoa, oh my God, I really felt that. When you tapped in, I really felt it. And I'm like, well, that's cool because when I first started practicing on people, they'd be like, oh, I feel a little warm, or I feel a little this, and now it's like, whoo, like I felt
I know
that.
that's
So
the best when you get the like, whoo, shit, I felt that, you're like, all
yes.
right.
Hmm.
I love that. And then, so what have you kind of witnessed in your Akashic records? Like, so like I know when I did the shamanic Muniki rites, it was the same thing. And I'd taken that after I learned Akashic records. So none of it felt unfamiliar to me. Everything felt like I'd already done it. And so shamanic healing, or having a lot of lifetimes doing that. Um, None of it felt out of place or something I hadn't heard, done, seen, or experienced before. So I didn't necessarily explore a whole bunch of lifetimes after that, but I just knew, you know what I mean? Like, okay, that makes
Yep.
sense. And everything I learned, it was just like kind of like the reactivation, like we talk about and accelerated intuitive. But like, what have you witnessed? I mean, it's not all good. It's not all sunshine and roses, but like, what have you
No.
witnessed in some of your lifetimes as a healer that inspired you,
Mhm.
and kind of gave you that, yeah, that's pretty fucking awesome, or I want to use that today, or have you come across anything yet that's been like really pivotal for you?
Yes, and absolutely. I feel like, well, first and foremost, just being able to even tap into it to me was like, whoa. Because again, I was just like, am I just super creative? I'm just, am I just gonna make this up? And then things started happening where I was like, this is too weird to be a coincidence. And so yeah, there was a lot of difficult things I tapped into with like karmic stuff with people that I have like soul contracts with, that I've been just immensely struggling with in this lifetime. So to kind of learn to cut cords, regrow them in a healthy way has just really, that's helped a lot. But I feel, the one that really stuck out to me when I was a healer was one, and this felt extremely old. Um, where I was like in a cave, and that's where I learned that I would heal people sometimes just by talking with them, or they would say something and I just kind of like shudder and it would pass. And it's kind of funny because when I went into this class, and when you talked about like galactic beings and all this other stuff, no judgment for me, but I was like, nah, I don't believe in that. And that doesn't make
I'm
sense to
pretty
me.
sure I said you will.
And you're right, because in that lifetime I was very surprised that like while I was in this cave, um this being came forward that was very like extraterrestrial looking, and even in the lifetime I was like, holy shit, what is that? Because I'm some random kind of cave person, and what is this? And
Random cave healer.
yes, and this like scary 10-foot tall thing came forward, and it was just so strange because it kept saying Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And, I've actually, the voice that it used, I've heard in meditations before. So that's when I was like, okay, I do think there is something real to this. And I met more galactic beings, and it was very much like they had orbs of light that they were putting in my hands and on my eyes and other parts of my body. And after that, I really felt like my gifts were starting in this lifetime to increase. And so that really stuck out to me, where I'm like, okay, I really need to tone down like the doubt and whatever. And now they're part of my spirit team that I call on when I'm like, I need help with my healing abilities. Um, so that's been fantastic. I know that, you and I cleared a really difficult lifetime that had a lot to do with like the anxiety that I've had in this lifetime. And that was definitely an interesting one. And I'm still clearing from it. It's been a couple weeks, and I anticipate it's probably going to be longer, just because it was so heavy. um but it's just so interesting, that like I just immediately felt the shift. Or even like when we cleared, there was a really icky entity attached to me in that lifetime. And I told you, I'm like, I'm burping, and you're like, and it tastes really bad. And you're like, does it taste like sulfur? And I'm like, what? Yes. How do you know that? And it just, so it's, to me, it's just crazy. It's like spirits like giving me like, hey, here's all this like goddamn proof you wanted. It's right here. No, quit
Here,
doubting it.
scientists, take it.
Yes. And
Here's your Peru. Like,
yes, that you need all the time. So yeah, and I'm willing to talk about pretty much any lifetimes, but just generally speaking, it's crazy to me that, like in that really difficult lifetime, for example, where I was institutionalized in an insane asylum and was just really had like no bodily autonomy. I had no control over myself, or of like my health and my mind, and um, suffered a lot of abuse and things that actually are, I mean, beyond anxiety, have physically been affecting me in this lifetime. Um, it's just like I still sometimes am like in awe of like that happened and it felt real. And I've seen glimpses of it earlier in my life, and I didn't understand it. And now I understand it. And it was hard to push through, but it's been worth it. So, it's again, like you said, this class can hit really hard, but if you're willing to put in the work and do the work, holy crap, is it just like, I just feel so much more empowered. I feel so much more confident. And I feel like I have control of myself back. And I didn't even know that I didn't feel like I had control of myself. So, yeah.
yeah, and like that's what I like to say about the Akashic Records. I think there's it's such a hidden gem in your healing and your spiritual journey, because it holds so much of who you are, who you were. You can bring so much forward, and you can release so much shit. Like, you have no idea how much it really, like, that lifetime affected you in a lot of ways in this lifetime, just that one,
Yeah.
so how many other lifetimes have dangling little cords that are kind of fucking with your shit, you know what I mean? And um and it's just such a, and the DNA activations really shake up what you personally need to get rid of, and doing the past life work, and because you guys are learning the past life work for yourselves, and you'll be learning it for your clients. So how to help your clients facilitate through it, and you're going to be going through this yourself, so then you understand, like, okay, this is a past life thing. And it gets super easy. Like, I already know if somebody's talking like, past life, like I already see it. So it's like, ooh, past life. That's not just today. So it's like you guys will definitely get there, and you're like, oh, you got some pet. It's just not automatic, like, ooh, you should probably do like an Akashic session. But that's
Ladies
their free
first
will
every
choice at the
day.
same time.
Yeah.
But I like
So,
that you're leaning into, and I mean, your Akashic Records bring forth a lot of guides and different like beings. And I mean, that's
yeah.
where I get a lot of my random ass Star Warsy type creatures and beings.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
like, okay. I mean, we've done a couple live sessions, and I was like, okay, I've never seen that before, but all right, we'll just roll with it. and you just, either you add them into your arsenal or you're like, nah. But most of the time, if they come forward, you want them in your arsenal because they're coming forward for a reason. So I like that you were able to kind of, because I was the same way with galactic beings. I was like, no, not anything to do with it. And then I went to Heather's very first retreat in Sedona. I'm like, fuck, now I don't have a choice. Like they started lining up out on the big old red rocks, and I was like, fuck me. And now
Oh God,
they just been in tow ever since. So I'm just like, fine, whatever. You can't probe me. You can't. That's my hard stop. And they're like, we're not gonna probe you. And I'm like, okay, I know. Like that's my hard line. It ain't gonna happen. But now, one of them is always helps me. And I have another one that comes in if kind of more negative things are coming or around or whatever it is. So I think it's that because I'm kind of the same as you, where I used to like feel I needed to prove. And I know we talked about this in class. I'm like, don't try to Google it, don't try to prove it. Just
Yep.
allow it. Because the more that you just allow whatever needs to come in, the more expansive your experience. Because at first I tried to really like, okay, well, it would be like this time, and like this is kind of the year they're saying, and
Right.
then this is the location, but then like how do you
Yep.
prove it? And then when I learned to not prove it, I don't have to prove it. Spirit brings it forward. I just talk about it, and if they need the proof, that's on them. But you know,
Mhm.
um, because when you allow yourself to have the experience you need, especially because you're an artist as well, like you don't limit your art, you know what I mean? So when you allow
Right.
spirit, God, universe to bring you who or what, my thing is always who or whatever they need, and they fucking deliver, because it's usually some random ass weird being or thing, and you're like, really? Like I can't tell them you're here, and they're like, it'll be fine. They'll sometimes they say over time they'll accept it. I'm like, really? That's what I have to tell them? Over time they'll accept it. Like, okay. But so it's I love that you kind of allowed him in already, and allowed him to be part of your team and to help. And I work very openly, so whoever a person needs, because that's who or what they need. If your grandma,
Yeah.
usually for me grandmas are the first in line, and then other things. Sometimes it'll just be some random being or thing, and you're like, this is who they need, and they're like, yep. I'm like, all right, let's go. So you like
Right.
you just pull up your boots and you get to work. But um
Mhm.
I've really found, and it takes a lot of the mind fuckery out for me. Of in the beginning I had a lot of the doubt, like, oh my God, how could I explain this? How could I talk about this? How could I? But when I just really started to allow it to be, how have you felt in that process? Like kind of just allowing things. Do you think it's getting easier as you're kind of working through the mental, emotional, and clearing and kind of processing as things are coming up? Do you think it's getting easier to kind of be open and expansive? Does it feel better to you to be open and expansive?
Yeah, it definitely does. I feel like because with the doubt comes like the fear and and I've spent so much of my life being so afraid, like of what's gonna happen,
Getting in
if I
trouble. What's coming? What?
yes, I'm like, oh my God, what if I lose my job? And it's like, okay, well, knock on wood, that has like never happened to me. So like, good God, stop worrying about it.
Well, I
um,
have, and what I can say is it's not nearly as bad as what you
yes,
imagine is going to happen. It's usually a blessing in disguise.
right. Survive, and and it ends up being okay. And um yeah, I feel like that surrender and everything has just been great, like for my spiritual gifts, of course. Like it seems like I can tap into things much more easily and not have to be in such a deep meditation or half asleep or dreaming, because I get a lot of info when I'm dreaming, but it's hard to control that. um Now I feel like I'm like, okay, I can just kind of close my eyes, breathe a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I'm there, I'm understanding things. But also just in my personal life too, again, like you had said, my husband had talked about how the past couple of months I'm just much more grounded, much more, I don't want to say reasonable, because I don't think I'm unreasonable, but I could be a little high strung, just a little bit maybe, but or a little controlling. That's eased up a little bit. So it just feels like, just in a whole encompassing way, things just feel easier. And there's just less fear on so many levels. And I am looking forward to continuing to like work on that and push through that, because I am so, so tired of being afraid. And
It
Yeah.
gets old. It's so exhausting being afraid all the
Yes.
time. Like, I was always afraid of what I'm gonna do wrong, what I'm gonna say wrong. Did I say the wrong thing? Am I gonna get in trouble? Like, fucking on top of your anxiety, on top of your ADHD, on top of your panic, you're just
Yes.
like, "Fuck, it's just a goddamn you're just a fucking snowballed nightmare waiting
It's just a
to fucking
circus.
happen." Yeah, it's like, "Okay, which hamster wheel is gonna fall off first?" Like, okay, throw some more in there. So I
Yup.
totally get that fear thing, because I know in a lot for a lot of mine was a lot of past life um, persecution, and there was just some elements of the fear in there of not knowing when you're, like, and some of it was
Yeah.
like war type things or whatever, but I had a lot. I understand that fear part because I had a lot of that fear stuff as well. So, how has your art shifted, like in your spiritual journey? Has your how what you create different in your kind of art space?
Yeah, I one thing I kind of started with, because I've always felt like at my core I'm an artist, and something I learned when I went and to art school was that, like, you're being an artist is like an identity. It's part of you. You can be an artist in all kinds of ways, or like an alchemist, where you take something and you turn it into something else. And so um I started doing aura paintings, which are cool.
Ooh,
People
cool.
tend to enjoy those. And so that's been kind of neat, because I'm like, oh, I close my eyes and I do Reiki and I see these flashes on people, and I'm like, oh, you've got pain there, you've got this going on, like, oh my gosh, like I can see this around you, and that's pretty cool. But that aside, in my actual art, because I work in autopsy and pathology, I actually have I got a grant about a little over a year ago that I've been working on making this huge project of basically like autopsy related art, because
Ooh, interesting.
I am fascinated by death. A lot of people are fascinated by death. They're fascinated by what happens to the body when we die. And I feel that this spiritual journey has really changed my perspective on death, where
Yeah,
it's like, in tarot, death is a rebirth. Death, it's the end of something and the beginning of something else. And um I just find it so cool, because I've always not always, but as of late, seen death as just as beautiful as birth.
yeah,
Where birth is things coming together to produce something, and death is just things coming undone. And so, you know, I've been working on this project, and I just have been feeling so much more inspired, that initially it started off as like, I've been working on a series of eyes. There's a lot of cool things that happen to, your eyes when you die, that you present at autopsy, that indicate a wide variety of things. And as I am, kind of wrapping up that project, I find myself thinking about, I'm like, how, but like the eyes, they're like the window of the soul. And I start adding like more to this project than just the pathology anatomical part. So I feel I'm excited that spirituality is making this project something just much bigger than I anticipated. So I'm not sure if
that's
that
really
exactly
cool.
answered your question, but
I like
yeah,
that. That's a
it's just,
cool. I know
yeah.
my daughter is like fascinated. She watches every serial killer documentary, whatever, and she's an amazing like hand sketch artist. So,
Sure.
she's
Mhm.
drawn some crazy. I just asked her today for her graduation on Saturday. I'm like, hey, I want get some of your sketches out so that I can put some of them up. And she's like, I threw them all out. I'm like, what? What?
But why?
She's like, my art has changed. I'm like, yeah, that's called a portfolio. And
But you
she's
put it
like,
in a box and keep
I'm like, "Oh
it.
my god, did you seriously?" She goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh my god, like you no." I was just like, "Oh my god." So, but I love that you've taken that perspective. And I totally agree. Death now for me is not so much of a loss and a grief and a pain. Yes, like I've had two physical deaths in my life in the last year. Um,
Mm,
while they're still painful, it's not nearly as detrimental because I know they're in a good place. They're in a way better place than this shithole,
yeah.
and they're just in this magical place with no pain, no worries, no fears, no nothing. So that kind of aspect of the loss isn't nearly as painful. But I love that you've put it into art, and it's just kind of with the eyes that you were talking about. It's almost like you can do like a whole nother one now, like afterlife of,
Mhm.
like what they get to see in the afterlife. It's just beauty and vision, and
Yeah.
where the human eyes just see what they see. Us as kind of developed intuitives get to see the other world, but most
Mhm.
people just kind of see the black and white life, where we get to see kind of the color version. And then when you
Mhm.
pass, like, their soul gets to see all the good stuff. So it's like, that's a cool sequence that you've created in art. And it's such a odd art space, but it's so, to
Yes.
me, it's fascinating. To some people, they're probably like, oh my God. But I'm like, dude, your meat suit dies, it dies. Like, it's just what it is. So um I love that you've done that. So I have to ask you this one question, and it's gonna make you fucking laugh. So how is I call raccoons trash pandas, because you have a camera and I see you feeding the possum. So
Yes.
last night I saw you put a raccoon. Has there been a fight? Like, what's happening with that? Like, I'm very
No.
curious to know if they're having a food territory war.
Okay, well, I will say I've been waiting for like the trifecta of like a skunk raccoon like possum fight. And I really hope it doesn't happen, but like they seem surprisingly they seem to cohabitate. Like there are so many stray cats around my house, which I love because I love cats. And but no, sometimes I'll get videos and pictures of like the possum and like a cat eating the food that I put out and whatever. But yeah, like I said, I am waiting for the trifecta, and that's gonna be like World War III.
Oh my
So
God. I immediately go to, and you're young, so uh the John Candy movie, A Great Outdoors. Um
Mhm.
when the raccoons are like talking, like, like they have words on the screen. And I
Yeah,
just keep thinking that raccoon that was standing on his feet last night, I'm like, that fucking possum and that raccoon are gonna go at it. I want to see who's gonna win. Like
they're gonna fight over the cat food I put out. Yep.
they're both a little savage. Or, maybe they'll just cohesively eat, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay. But I know, I was like, oh my God, I gotta see what happens with this. I feel like there's gonna be some type of a throwdown, a turf war of whose food it really is. But I was dying last night when I saw the raccoon. I'm like, oh my God, where's the possum?
Yeah, I'll keep you posted if they actually battle, but it seems like it's been pretty peaceful so far, but
It's interesting
again,
that none of them have brought little babies around. It's kind of interesting.
I'm waiting for that. I think at that point my life will be complete, is if one of the possums come with their little baby stuck to their back, and I'll be like, if I die tomorrow, it's okay because this is what I wanted out of life.
Oh my
So,
God, that's
yeah,
awesome.
we'll see.
Okay, so what do you want to leave people with? How can people find you? And, if your art's for sale, if you're offering sessions, like, how can, people find you?
Sure. Well, I would say first, like my favorite words to live by are, there's a quote, and I of course don't remember who said it, but the only thing I know is that I know nothing. And so that's something that I live by. I encourage other people to live by that, just like, gosh, just keep an open mind, stay curious about life, even through the hard things. You don't necessarily have to stay positive, but just stay curious, just what does this mean? How can I overcome? Those are things that I guess have really, really helped me change my perspective in the past couple of years. In terms of Reiki and all that fun stuff. So my business is called Hands of Fire Healing. I have a Facebook and an Instagram so far, and a website. I'm just kind of getting off of my feet or getting, getting started with my business, I should say. So I am absolutely accepting clients, and people can just private message me and we'll set something up. And I also do oracle readings and, like I said, the aura paintings and all that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah,
um, yeah. Thank you so much for having me today.
absolutely. Thank
This
you
is
for
very
coming
fun.
on. Thank you for talking about all that you do and your experience. lights and all of the good
Mhm.
stuff. And I'm so stoked to find out what happens at night. It's like you almost can't wait for those cameras to go on. Like I
Oh
feel
my
like it's
God.
gonna be
I get
Snow
it.
White and like some type of an animal Armageddon. Like,
Yeah.
those animals are gonna end up being like my dog now. She has diabetes and she won't eat the regular peasant food unless I put the fancy wet food on top of it. She just looks at me like, "Bitch, I want the good stuff." And I don't give her very much of it, just enough because she has to have insulin, and I can't give her the
Yeah.
insulin until she eats. So she'll fucking look at me like, "Are you serious?" Like she won't eat. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Elsa, you need to eat right now." And she'll like, and she almost like huffs like, ugh. And then
Yeah.
she'll eat a little bit if I'm out of like the fancy wet food, and I'm just like, so she'll go outside, stand on the porch, and I'm like, "You need to go to the bathroom." And she'll look at me like, "No, you told me to go outside." And then she thinks if she comes in, she gets food. I'm like, "You have
Mhm.
played the system. I'm no fool. And I'm the only one that gives you insulin. So you ain't getting fed 3 times from me." So she'll get the
Yeah.
others every once in a while, but those
Oh,
animals, they get accustomed to your treats that you give them, and then they're like,
yeah.
bitch, no, you got me accustomed to the good stuff. Now you need to give me the good
Yeah.
stuff."
Yeah. You put cake out last week, and it's so hard to say no because I'm like, gosh, you were giving me so much serotonin. Um, so it's like I
You'd be
gotta like
like,
spoil
"You bring
you.
me your babies and I will give you cupcakes."
Yeah, I will put a turkey out there. So, Thanksgiving spread if you bring your babies. So,
Just put it out there to spirit, say, "What do I got to do to get her to
yes,
bring her babies around?" Like,
that's a good idea.
have them wrestle them up and just bring all the possum families, like, "Hey, the hookup's over here." You're gonna go out one morning and it's just gonna be like a wasteland of possums. You're like, "Oh my god."
Oh, my dream come true. I'd call into work that day for sure.
I know the day you posted your earrings, I was dying. I was like, "Are those possums?"
Oh
And I
yeah.
was like, "Oh my god, that's awesome." Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good afternoon and thank you for being on this episode of the Spiritual Badass Podcast. I hope everybody has a great week. If you would like information on the Accelerated Intuitive, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can DM me and I will send you a link to schedule a free call. The next round starts on June 7th, so please don't hesitate to get in. It is limited space, and I'm excited to see if you are prepared and ready for this amazing accelerated intuitive journey.